Oh, preparing data for AI, I think is going to be the next big focus and investment area. It's one thing to say, okay, I now have a data governance process. It's another thing for data to be used by the AI systems. I know there have been so many systems, whether it's Databricks, data lakes, and I think for many reasons they did serve a purpose, but they didn't take the challenge all the way through. They didn't really solve the problem.
Welcome to the CTO Compass podcast. I'm your host, Mark Wormgoor, tech strategist and executive coach. In every episode, we meet tech leaders, from startup CTOs to enterprise CIOs, to explore what it means to lead in tech today. They share their stories and their lessons so that you can navigate your own journey in tech. Let's dive into today's episode. Most CIOs, CTOs, they aren't behind on AI because they picked the wrong model. They're behind because maybe their data isn't wrong or the amount of licenses is not going to fix that. Culture is also an issue. Today, I'm joined by Santosh Kaveti, the CEO and founder of ProArch. And he's going to break down a practical playbook for larger scale, more corporate AI, how to overcome any of those blockers, what data readiness means, something that we're really going to talk about for enterprises, and how to move from pilots to actual business outcomes and real results without creating more security and compliance risk. We're also going to talk a bit about the elephant in the AI room, Microsoft Copilot, and see how Santosh feels about that. So, quick favor, if you like this episode, you get any value from it, you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're watching this on Apple or Spotify, please do give us a rating, give us a review, and we'd love to hear from you as well. So, Santosh, very much welcome today. I'm really happy to have you on.
Thank you, Mark. I'm glad to be here.
So, and let's dive right in, right? There's all these companies and especially boards and CEOs that are just saying, let's do more with AI. A lot of those are corporate Microsoft shops. You run a Microsoft services organization. What happens in those cases? What have you seen happen? And what are the top three signals that it's probably going in the wrong direction?
Well, there are plenty of signals that, in my opinion, are probably going in the wrong direction. Top three. So I think it's not just Microsoft play. This is enterprise AI adoption play. I keep repeating this, and you said this. It's not about the model. It's not about the technology. It's about the readiness, preparedness, and the culture and the mindset. And those are the big blockers. What is your starting point, and how good is that starting point? And that's what we emphasize a lot. Whether it is a small business, a medium-sized, or even enterprise, most often the starting points are always just gobbled up. They're all over the place, whether it is organizational culture, training, security, governance. And to bring all of that together and create a solid starting point is probably 70 to 80% of the problem solved, in my opinion.
And what does that look like? If I'm a CEO or I'm a CIO or CTO, it doesn't matter. And I think it's ChatGPT's been out for 3 years now, I think. So everybody is really getting there right now. Where do I start? How do I make sure that my team, my organization, my tech team, but also all the other teams in my organizations are ready for AI to go and adopt and just go full force?
Great question. So, look, I've seen a big change even in the last 6 months. 6 months or prior, the conversation was at a very basic level. I'm happy to say that the conversations we're now having today is we're not having to educate businesses on the basic risks that they have to be aware of. So that's a good thing. The challenge still is, as you rightly said, you have several silos. There is a legacy, organizational structure that we've built, and then the legacy processes that we have built. And now here, AI it has the potential to break a lot of those myths and structures, and therefore it cannot be siloed conversation. So, give you one example. In one of our recent engagements, the security folks, were obviously, concerned that AI is going to expose, security risks. throughout the organization. Rightfully so. The business folks really wanted to get on with it, right? And they want to start using AI and start using AI right now. Okay. But bringing them together and really talking about, do they really understand what these risks are? Okay. There are data risks. Before you even get into security risk, you have to understand, where your preparedness of data is, your data governance, data quality. Are you there, the maturity level where you think you are now can go in AI and start using the data for AI? And even so, what kind of risk that AI itself will bring, into onto the table? Are you aware of that? The good news is, again, we're a Microsoft partner, so I understand that ecosystem in and out. We drink that Kool-Aid. We are the customer zero. We implement that internally as well for ourselves. There are tools and technology that is available to mitigate most of the risk. Now, the risks are evolving. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, I don't think there's any security tool that covers all the risks, because, as I said, the risks themselves are evolving. And every week we found a new security vulnerability that exposed some data. It is about that collaboration and the collective decision making, and do it faster and at scale. And that's the key to success, in my opinion. You cannot take the traditional approaches, or even the workflow processes. The other big thing was, most organizations to date, they continue to try to look at AI as something that they can bolt on. And even with Copilot, a lot of this happened. Okay. Without understanding how, how it's not if it can unlock the value, it's like, how do you want to unlock its value? Are you really ready to do that? So that requires reimagining the workflows altogether. In the AI native world, a workflow that spawns multiple departments, multiple functions, multiple users cannot look the same that it looked in the legacy world. It will be much more efficient if you can reimagine that workflow. And when you do that, even the security becomes actually manageable. So that, to me, is a biggest conversation we're having now, is not so much how to just plug in AI, and bolt on AI, is how do you really integrate that? How do you reimagine your workflows? And are your tools, other systems, can all of them support this new workflow that will work, perfectly for AI native world? I hope it makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. Leads to so many questions, but let me start with the first one that came up in my mind, at least. One of the things you said, and we also talked about it in our pre-discussion, is data readiness. It's a very, it's a vague concept. What does that mean? What does that look like for you? So when you work with a customer, what does data readiness for AI look like?
Wow. Well, that's an excellent question. So we recently worked with a healthcare customer. Then they are in the Medicare management space. Right? And they really wanted to use AI. And good thing was, they had some realization that, look, we have so much data and it's spread across so many silos and so many buckets. And yes, we have data lakes, but those are really not useful to us. They became swarms. And now, how do we really go from here? The first thing we've done is look at their data maturity. And yes, there is a elaborate governance process that you can put in place. But if you can just take the noise out and look at what matters to them in their business context, you can narrow it down. And my suggestion to all the businesses is, y- look at your data as products. If every function or a department or a data owner can look at themselves as, I'm creating this data and that will be used as a product by rest of the enterprise, that's the biggest cultural shift that you can create. It boils down to ownership of data and the quality of data. These two are, super basic, important, established processes that you have to put in place. Without that, you will not go anywhere. Okay. Now, of course, you can put in a lot of security controls, make sure that, you have, whether you use Microsoft product ecosystem or something else, whether you use Purview, Entra ID. There are tools available to make sure that your data is secure and protected and your PI is protected. But ultimately, you have to have users, departments, functions own that data and say, whatever I'm entering into the system, this has to have some level of sanctity, and I need to get this right, because this will be the product, into some other systems or many systems. So data as products is something that we've been preaching and we've been advising and we've been consulting on. And honestly speaking, once we were able to do that, really establish, okay, you are the stewards, you are the owners. This is how the quality would look like. This is how good quality of data would look like, and go establish this first. And they've done that in a few weeks, and then they were honestly ready to go on the AI journey. So it didn't take as long as it used to. Again, we used AI for a lot of this, but ultimately within 3 to 4 weeks, we were able to get them to understand the data governance process and start implementing that. And within 6 to 8 weeks, they were actually beginning to produce really good quality data that they felt like, okay, we're now confident we can use this.
It's interesting because, I mean, in my own experience, we've been preaching this for, let's say, the past 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, that business departments should own their data, marketing needs to own its own data, supply chain needs to own its own data, and be responsible for data quality. I've preached it myself without a lot of great results, to be fair. Do you see that now changing because of AI? Is it becoming different?
Absolutely. I've seen two big shifts in the mindset, and that came through the power of AI. Because businesses now realize the potential of AI, they are more willing to take the ownership of data, like before. It's no longer a cost center or something that they have to do in addition to what they were doing before. That reluctance, that resistance is still there, but it's much, much less at understandable levels because they now understand the potential. Before, unfortunately, they didn't really understand the potential, nor were the recipients of the resultant potential because it was downstream somewhere. Yeah, you can get a BI report, but I know what, I could do that in my Excel sheet. I already know how to do that. I don't need to go through all of this so that I can get a BI report. So they are now able to see it and feel it and use it, and that changed. The other thing that changed is their interest. They're actually pushing for security. Security was always an afterthought, and security was always sitting somewhere in a silo, right? Now they're pushing for, okay, how do we secure this? I know we understand this. What do we do? And in fact, I'm now finding out in many conversations where businesses are pushing for security changes faster, and security and IT teams are actually behind the scene, and they're reacting and they're trying to catch up. So these two big shifts that I've seen in the last, I would say, even 6 months to 1 year.
It's incredible. I would say, from my perspective, finally, it's been too long, I would say, but I'm really happy to see that you're seeing that happen across the world. And still, then there's a lot of legacy. I would say you have all this old data from the past. There's all these siloed data databases. I would say data stores. Where do you start? I mean, what do you do in those first 4 weeks, and how do you get at least it under some sort of control that from there on data quality starts to grow and become better?
Well, preparing a data for AI, I think, is going to be the next big focus and investment area. It's one thing to say, okay, I now have a data governance process. It's another thing for data to be used by the AI systems. Um, we, of course, I know there have been so many systems, whether it's Databricks, data lakes, and I think for many, many reasons, they did serve a purpose, but they didn't take the challenge all the way through. They didn't really solve the problem all the way through. So we look to see. We of course use the medallion architecture prescribed by Microsoft, classified the data into different layers, and whether it is silver, gold, or bronze or gold, and at what level can they consume, and what system is able to consume it, what level of maturity, and so on. But now there is a really good technology, right? Of course, we are big fans of Fabric, and that's what we use extensively. Whether you use Fabric or whether you use any other system, I think now it's much easier to assess your data readiness, then say, okay, am I ready to start using AI, true AI systems? Am I ready to create agents? Am I ready to create integration between agents? Am I ready to create integration between my own ERPs, and so on and on?
So let's say that we have this data under control. It's well, we know who owns it. It's in the right place. We can actually go and start to use it. How do businesses then actually start using that for AI? Because again, what I've seen, you have all these pilots. Everybody wants to start a pilot, and very few of those actually make it to production level, working every day type results. How do you see that happening?
Again, great questions. What I've seen, I'm going to start with failures. Where I've seen most businesses fail is one, they're going about solving a technology or technical problem. Now, not a business problem or seeking a business outcome. My strong recommendation is start out and say, I'm going to change this business problem or a process. And the outcome is this is what I want. I want to see a reduction in my, for example, there's a manufacturing plant that we've been working with. So they want to see a reduction in the waste that comes out of the plant, and they want to see a reduction of like 0.5%. Is a big deal for them. Now the question is, how do I use AI for that? That's what you'll start with, and then you then break it down. And when you break it down, data is one part of it. Data is not the answer, right? You have multiple systems, multiple controls, from physical to software to devices to equipment. So you have to really break it down to see where you can apply AI and how you're going to apply AI. Your data plays a big part in every decision making there, but it's coming from multiple systems. And that's another big, I would say, gap in understanding is people, think they solve the problem from either technical perspective or underestimate enterprise workflows and the integration that it requires across the workflows, across the systems to be able to solve a problem. And that's where we should focus on. So always start with your business problem. What is it you're trying to accomplish? You want to see some change and be as quantifiable as you possibly can. And then you'll start seeing the results as you break it down. And that's where we will see most successes when we are able to take the conversation back to, okay, Fabric is great. It solves the problem, but let's go to the business problem first and look to see what systems are in place. What are the current workflow look like? And where can we really apply AI? Are we now in a position to reimagine this workflow? Are you able to do that? If you really want to gain a significant advantage, sometimes they have to be able to reimagine the complete workflow and how it will look like in an AI native world. That itself is going to be a big change. But that's where we've seen most success is having that clarity on, okay, this is what we're trying to solve, and this is what's involved in solving that, and this is how we're going to solve the problem. And I know it sounds basic, but that's where most people get stuck.
And actually solving a business problem instead of a technology problem. So if I'm a CIO, right, or a CTO, I'm leading the tech organization internally, and I have the next 3 months to actually go and prove that we can implement AI, right? That there's real value to be had. Where do I start? What does that 90-day, 3-month plan look like to go from I need to do something to I'm actually proving business value? What are the steps?
Oh, fantastic. So we have a program that we implement whenever we get pulled into that situation. We call it Impact Now. So again, what we do is go in there and try and understand, do they have clarity in the business problem that they're trying to solve? And if they do, that's really good. That's like 25 to 35% right there. But if they don't, that's what we focus on. Is let's pick a use case and try to really understand why you're picking that use case as well. In one case, one of the companies that we worked with, they wanted to increase the efficiency and the speed of their RFP responses by 50%, because they review and submit like 500 RFPs per month sometimes, or even more. So for them, they have a huge workforce doing this, right? So you take that as an example, a great example. Okay, now you're trying to improve the accuracy and the efficiency of your RFP itself, but then you also want to improve the speed. Okay? The good thing is once you start there, you can break it down. What are the systems they're managing the RFPs through? How does the RFP look like? What is their line of business? You break it down. Where you apply AI? What are the security concerns that we need to be aware of? How do you plug in the security from the get go, and so on? If you cannot solve in this, I would say in this era, even in these times, in the last 6 months, you need to be able to solve an AI use case within 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, that's the window that we've seen, is that typically, even for relatively less mature organizations, they should be able to go on this journey and solve a business problem in about 4 to 6 weeks.
That's quite ambitious. Nice, right? So give me a story, right? I think you've named a couple of companies about the challenges that they had. Do you have like a story from somebody that started at the beginning to actual real business results implemented? And what did that look like from start to finish?
Yeah, absolutely, we do. So we work with a lot of power plants, and we help with the critical infrastructure. That's one of the things we do. So then there is a Copilot implementation for individual productivity gains, and most people even get that wrong for two reasons. It's not a Copilot problem; it's a problem of, are you ready to unlock the value? Do you have the data readiness? I mean, do you understand that where your data comes from? Does a Copilot have access to that data? And do you have the security controls in place to make sure that the data is protected? So, and once done right, we've seen individual productivity gains even up to like 40%, saving somebody's 40% of the time that they used to spend. Okay. Now, from there, we've implemented agents, created agents that spawn, not only again individually, but spawn multiple, multiple people and multiple departments as well. Okay. To some advanced applications, like being able to be, and this AI has always been there. Like for example, looking at the wind turbines, the vibrations, the temperatures, the weather data, overlying all of that, to be able to say, hey, what kind of preventative and prescriptive maintenance can we do on this equipment, SCADA equipment, or turbines, or pumps, and so on and on. But where now the Gen AI helps is bringing all of the data to create your own model that you can refine on top of. That can give you much more intelligent, much more intelligence to you than just being reactive or even prescriptive sometimes. So we've seen some power plants take it all the way through.
Cool. So actually I mean, this old AI, this is pre-LLM, right? About the wind turbines and just measuring the data and just analyzing, right? Preventative maintenance, to bring all that together with Gen AI and actually unlocking that data. Let's say that one of these power companies has taken it to the end. What's it unlocked for them that wasn't there before?
Their ability to look at their entire power plant operations in a digital twin mode. See, digital twin in the past was kind of frowned upon because it was very difficult to create a digital twin, and everybody's meaning of digital twin was different. It's still different, right? But being able to look at a model where they can visualize all of their equipment and the flow, overlay a lot of external data along with their internal data and the corporate data, to create the the efficiencies. Sometimes for them, as we're going through right now, seasons change, the weather change, and being able to react to a weather event much faster. Sometimes even take proactive measures and prescriptive measures as well, and that's what they've done. Their operational efficiency have gone up. I mean, I don't think they quantified it to what level, but they definitely see much less downtime and more readiness to react, and their preparedness to react. And they can even predict certain equipment. What they're doing now is, before, they used to probably wait for an event to happen, or they used to look at some audit systems or their maintenance system to say, hey, the maintenance of this thing has come up. Now they're proactively saying, look, if I do maintenance right now, I'm going to be 25% more efficient than waiting for something to happen or waiting for the prescribed maintenance time. That's what they're able to do, and save a lot of time and money.
Sounds cool. Nice. So you were going to say something before? I
So yeah, well, the point I was going to make was, thanks to Gen AI and its paradigm shift, um, what previously probably most people shied away from implementing traditional AI, machine learning algorithms or neural network algorithms or vision algorithms, they are now surfacing as well as really good use cases. Um, you know, Probably they thought was complicated, too expensive, whatever the reasons were that they didn't do it, and now are becoming, okay, let's do that right now. and take advantage of the AI. So we're seeing a lot more of those use cases where they could have done the same thing 3 years ago or 4 years ago.
Oh, but I think what we're also seeing is that a lot of companies like Google and Microsoft, all these ML learning models were really complex to implement, right? And now we're seeing a lot of these studios. I mean, Google has it, Microsoft has it, where even non-Gen AI machine learning has become so much more accessible than it was, I would say, 4 or 5 years ago. The models haven't really changed, but I think the accessibility and usability of it's really, really changed over the last couple of years.
It
How
has,
people see it.
we're seeing a verticalization, right? I mean, OpenAI has released ChatGPT Health recently, and Claude started with Claude for Legal, Claude for Code. I mean, you that's what we're going to see more of is specialization and depth, and that's where the context matters. And another big investments, in my opinion, for the next 1 year or two, will go into to creating that nuanced, specialized, verticalized context for AI systems. And you will see a lot more rollouts like that with a lot more connectors. As you rightly said, right? It's easier, much easier now to integrate into most AI systems.
Yeah, nice. So the elephant in the room that I also did want to talk about, I'm going to bring it up now. Microsoft Copilot, right? A lot of people in their personal life, or a lot of the startups or businesses, they're all in on ChatGPT. Maybe not so much anymore. It was the leading LLM. I think it's gone more to Gemini or Claude Code. A lot of enterprise corporate organizations are, I'd say, forced, but they have this big Microsoft agreement and they go with Microsoft Copilot instead, which is, I think, using a lot of the same models underneath. It triggers so many negative reactions, Copilot. What is that? And how do you see that playing out in the customers that you work with?
Again, really good question. So I'll admit, in the enterprise context is very different than the personal context. Okay. Uh, in my opinion, again, this is not a co-pilot problem. Let's say if you used any other, enterprise LLM or tool, let's say ChatGPT for enterprise, most of them initially would have faced the same issues. I think this is an enterprise AI adoption problem, and we've seen this ourselves as well initially when we started using that. Most people get on there with wrong expectations without being ready, without being trained. Once you fix those fundamental foundational blocks, training your users, making sure your data is accessible, ready, protected, and you have a good identity and access management solution in place, you're able to classify the label. That's where we spend a good bit of time, is making sure that the data is ready for Copilot. And a majority of ProArchians, we all use Copilot day in, day out. That's my starting point. And as you can see now, Copilot can work with multiple models, right? It's not one model. They are no longer just using one model or the other. You have access to any models that you can choose from. So we at the organizations that have successfully implemented, ProArch included, we're seeing significant returns. Again, that's another thing. Most people didn't know in the initial stages how to even measure the ROI. And activity is not good enough. You have to measure the outcome. End of the day, how much productive has somebody become and why? Once you're able to establish the right KPIs and do it the right way, we've seen significant, gains. I myself use Copilot day in, day out, and I can tell you, I can't imagine my life without it now, because I start with it on how, where is my day going, why, what's important, what's not, what should I focus on. Again, I do a good job of setting the context as well, right? Again, the prompting, as you all, I'm sure you've heard this, right? The AI, at least the individual productivity AIs are only as good as your prompts are. So you need to be able to train. So we have a center of excellence where we continuously educate, all of our not only ProArchians but even our customers, users, is through the constant educational mechanism, saying, hey, if you're solving this problem, probably this is a better way to do it. Go about trying this way of prompting, and this is a new way. Maybe you'll get there faster. And we're seeing really good results. Again, as I said, it's not Copilot problem. I think in the initial stages, it was probably any tool you plug in there would have probably given the same experience. But I can tell you, um, we've seen huge successes in many organizations, even large organizations, where we're getting reports back and saying, hey, we're saving at least 30 to 40 minutes a day.
So how do you measure that? Because I mean, I've been part of a Copilot pilot that was a year and a half ago. It was a long time ago in AI land. And then measuring productivity gains was like really, really hard, right? How do you measure that somebody saves? Well, first, how do you measure that somebody saves 30 to 40 minutes a day? And the second, and I think that's a more financial problem, how do you actually monetize that, right? I mean, it's nice that somebody has 30 to 40 minutes to spare at the end of the day, but you can't fire somebody for 5 or 10% of their time, right? So is there also a financial return on investment from implementing Copilot, or is it just, or any other LLM, right? I don't think that matters. Or is it just the cost of doing business today? How do you see that discussion happening in organizations?
I think there is a tangible, real financial result. I agree that is difficult to measure. What we look at is both what we can measure from systems, number of Copilot actions, the feedback that we receive instantly from everyone on that particular action, what they think was really good, what they think was not good. But then qualitative AI-driven surveys as well help to understand what is that someone has accomplished where it would have taken them days, they got it done in minutes. And what does it look like? So you have to kind of do both. I don't think you can just look at the actions or number of prompts and say, hey, this is good. You have to look at what's really working for everybody, why it's working for everybody. You have to make an active effort to try that. Even like as little as surveys. Look, traditional way of surveys is gone. We use very AI-driven surveying model where they could just kind of even talk to AI system and say, hey, this is what I've done in their own time, and say, this is what really worked for me. And we use that not only for knowledge sharing, but also say, okay, so somebody actually used this, and this is the productivity gain. It takes them 20 seconds to share that knowledge, as opposed to before they used to have to go to click and key in and do all of that, right? So you have to be very smart about it. But we're seeing that's a tangible financial change, in my opinion. Not just, I'm talking about only individual productivity gains, not even the advanced stuff of agents and all of that comes after.
Yeah. I understand the productivity gains if you run a power plant and you optimize efficiency by 25%. I mean, that's a real big financial gain. I can imagine that. This is like about the personal productivity gains and making that financially measurable, because on the other hand, you also have the cost of implementing that, right? I mean, and LLMs aren't cheap at, let's say, even $20 a year. It's still $250, which doesn't sound like much until you have 10,000 people in your organization. And then suddenly it becomes a big cost of doing business.
But
So
one
the
thing I would like to add, another change I've observed, including our own internally and with the customers, is when there is new project or a new initiative, conversations before were probably, okay, who do we need to hire? How many people do we need to hire? What does it, what will that cost, resourcing cost? I think the starting point now is becoming, how can we use AI to solve this problem? I've seen that shift happening is, hey, can AI really help me solve this problem? I don't have time, but can AI help me? And that's a good indicator that people are beginning to believe that AI can actually solve this problem. And we work with Microsoft very closely, and as a partner, sometimes Microsoft throws so much at us and changes so much at us as well that it's difficult for us to keep up. We have an agent that synthesizes for all of our teams on all the changes that Microsoft is bringing along, so that we are able to access and use it in solutioning, in sales, in marketing, in every which way. I'm just giving you one example. So people are beginning to ask a good question: can AI help me solve this problem?
Yeah, and I love that last example. I had a discussion with another business in the Netherlands locally, and they had the same issue. They build code, they put out software, and their release notes are just so complex and they're so extensive, and they have, I think, twice weekly releases. Nobody can actually read that and understand it. And just making that accessible, right? And it's a very simple thing to do. Making that accessible through AI just lets everybody ask their questions, and instead of just searching forever through release notes, which is like hell, to be honest. And Microsoft in the past, didn't do much better. It was just, you can't figure out what's changed in anything anymore, because there's just so much coming out every day. So if I'm a CIO or a CTO, right, and you have all these, well, let's say you have the 4 big models. You have Copilot, of course, you have Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok. I think that's 5. How should CIOs, CTOs, CEOs maybe even think about the 5 models? Should I make a decision just go all in? Should I just keep it high level so that it can and change when Gemini comes out on top, or Claude comes out on top, or maybe Grok at some point comes out on top? How do you advise your customers to think about this, I say, battle that's going on between the top five?
Yeah. My recommendation is to become model agnostic to the extent you possibly can. Your architecture cannot be married to a model to the extent where you cannot replace your architecture. That's going to be the fundamental thesis that we prescribe: is don't get married to a model. Because as you rightly said, okay, one day on LM Arena, you'll find Grok doing so much better on reasoning, and another day, Gemini takes over, right? So you need to be able to use the models as they evolve, as they get better. But your starting point is for the problem that you're trying to solve at the starting point. What is a better model, and how can I design the architecture where I can plug in the models, intelligence as and when needed, as opposed to, that's where your own context is super important. Invest in creating your own enterprise context. That's where the investment should go, and leveraging models as they evolve. I think that's going to be, and that's where I love Microsoft, because in a lot of ways they're becoming model agnostic. You could use Anthropic, you could use, Gemini, you could use the model. There are like over 2,500 models available to you for use.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes sense. Just keeping it model agnostic. I'll give you a story that I heard. This is a company that was building, I think they were building insurance policy review, and they had these prompts that worked exactly perfectly on one version of ChatGPT. And then, well, you get it, ChatGPT 5 comes out, and they need to almost rebuild all of their prompts. And that's
Right,
like,
prompt library. Yep.
yeah. So, and that's just not a sustainable way of building applications. I think you need to, like you said, make it create an enterprise context and then make it model agnostic so that you can plug in. Even the next version of ChatGPT is just going to respond differently on the same prompt. Same with
It will.
Copilot, same with Claude. So you can't tie into this one version of the LLM. Something else that you said, you talk about the 4 levels of AI enterprise adoption. Can you talk us through them? What those like 4 levels in your model are and how they work?
So for us, we've always used this thesis in principle. We start with individual productivity gains. That's where the copilots come into play. Then we mature them to creating agents, leveraging Copilot Studio. In parallel, we have effort to make sure that the data is right. That's where our fabric comes into play, and getting the data into the right layers comes into play. Then you look at solving the hard problems where you're setting the context. And that's where I am going to emphasize this a lot, because for the enterprises, investing in their enterprise context is going to be super critical, because AI is only as good as your context is. We've learned this even individually, is two different prompts, two different contexts, two different responses. As you rightly said, even the models are changing, and therefore the prompt responses will change. So the context is really important. And how do you build that context behind the scenes as an architecture, as infrastructure? That's where we spend a lot of time. Then you can build custom LLM applications, and you can integrate them into your workflows and enterprise workflows. And this is what we see it. So the first step for us is get aligned, make sure you're ready. Then you really can start amplifying, and then you can start accelerating.
And I think, I mean, building an enterprise context, having the enterprise context ready for with all of your different data from all of your different, let's say, verticals or silos. That sounds like an ideal place to be in. How many businesses have you seen that have already actually achieved that I'd say end goal? It's not an end goal because it's a starting point, I would say, for a more advanced AI usage. But how many businesses have you seen that have actually made that happen already?
I don't have a good answer for you. Not many, unfortunately, but they're getting there, though. The intent is there. They're making progress. I think even at scale, um, there are companies who probably skipped few steps and gone straight to solving complex problems. In mission critical situations, right? You need to use proper RAG methodologies so that your responses, like say, for example, precision matters to you. Okay, you're about to make a decision where if you make a bad decision, somebody's life is going to have an impact. Well, you can't hallucination has no place in there. How do you make sure that you set the enterprise context and you use methodologies where the accuracy is given, the model takes accuracy as super, paramount, as opposed to kind of, generalizing it or hallucinating. And there are ways to do that now. So there are so many gateways that you can control. So I've seen companies solve that problem and fail miserably at Copilot. So they're all over the place, but I don't think that I've seen a company which went through and solved all of these phases successfully to the potential that they could. You know. But as I said, every conversation these days is about that, which is good news.
Yeah. And then I'm going to ask you the question that is, well, I think has always been on my mind around AI. You have all these startups, scale-ups that are just, they have the luxury, I would almost say, of moving incredibly fast, right? They can make a decision, this enterprise context, they can have it done by next Friday. Just because their scope is so small. They have a team of maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 people, right? They have this luxury of moving so fast. Enterprises of 5, 10,000, they just can't, right? Things take much longer. And it feels sometimes that that gap between them is widening just because the enterprises can't move fast enough. How do you see that playing out? Do you think they'll be learning how to move faster as well, the enterprises? Is the gap going to widen? How do you see, what should enterprises do to keep up or stay up?
I'll give you a couple of examples, Mark. Enterprises will be forced to scale and scale at speed. AI also is busting the business model myths, right? Consulting is changing. The legal profession is changing. I tell my peers who are in the MSP business like ours saying, hey, there's an end of life written on MSPs and MSSPs if you're not going to adopt yourself to AI world, right? At some point that's going to be a problem. Business risks before, let's say, there is the threats, it probably would have taken 10 years to hit that threat very hard. It's now will only take like a year or two. So unless you are able to change quickly, you're forced to do it. So you might as well think about how to do it. And that's what we're seeing as well, is because AI small startups are able to do, as you rightly said, things that enterprises, can do well, but they're also able to disrupt so much now and disrupt so fast that if enterprises don't adopt, they're going to fall behind. They will be obsolete or irrelevant. And there's so many industries and so many business models that will have to be rethought through completely.
Yeah, and startups will definitely do that. And I think that's the advantage or indeed the downside of AI is that as a small business of maybe 5 people, I can do things at such enormous scale that just wasn't possible before because of AI. So I do think that changes the business model risk for a lot of large organizations, right? And the news that we recently heard about McKinsey now having 20,000 AI consultants. I still don't know what that means, right? But having 20,000 AI consultants on their payroll next to the 40,000 normal people that they have, it's going to change a lot of industries, especially the knowledge industries.
I myself, I probably created now a few AI agents for myself. To me, they are my consultants. I probably would have approached outside consulting for a lot of help. Today, I do a lot of that myself and then only approach on very, very niche, specialized questions if I have any. I can see what, I don't know how they look like or what they look like, but I can see why McKinsey would go down that path.
Thank you. No, and I mean, this has been incredibly helpful, insightful. If I'm a CIO or a CTO and I'm listening to this and I get the feeling I really, really need to start speeding up now or catching up, what's your single piece of advice to them? Where should they start tomorrow?
They should start asking the questions, where can I bring about the biggest change leveraging AI and why? And if they don't know the answer to the question, bring somebody else who can help that answer. Answering that question is their starting point. Today, I see most of them try to solve problems that don't really produce meaningful ROI. And that is where, as you rightly said, your podcast titles echoes this. Boards are beginning to ask questions. Even the boards today, honestly, I don't think are ready or don't know what are the good questions that we need to ask? What should we really ask, the executive management in terms of AI? What should we expect? You know, so it starts from there. But when it comes to CIO, I would say again, uh, what would change the business and the ROI, and what's that use case? And let's go after that. Let's go after that very hard. We call it impact now. Let's create that impact now. Let's showcase that it's possible, and then you will see everybody else coming up with so many ideas to do it.
Cool. Thank you so much. If people want to find you online, people want to reach out to you, where should they go?
I'm in LinkedIn. You'll find me, Santosh Kaveti, or proarch.com, proarch.com. That's where you'll find us.
Which is also in your background. People can read that. Nice. We'll also put everything in the show notes, of course. Santosh, it's been incredible having you on. Thank you so much for all of these insights.
Thank you for having me, Mark. Appreciate that.
As we wrap up another episode of the CTO Compass, thank you for taking the time to invest in you. The speed at which tech and AI develop is increasing, demanding a new era of leaders in tech. Leaders that can juggle team and culture, code and infra, cyber and compliance, all whilst working closely with board members and stakeholders. We're here to help you learn from others, set your own goals and navigate your own journey. And until next time, keep learning, keep pushing, and never stop growing.